Our laws as it pertains to substances are draconian and bizarre. The psychopaths start this way. He was an alcoholic because of social media and pornography, PTSD, love addiction, fentanyl and heroin. Ridiculous. I'm a doctor, for Christ's sake. Where the hell do you think I learned that? I'm just saying, you go to treatment before you kill people. I am a clinician. I observe things about these chemicals. Let's just deal with what's real. We used to get these calls on Loveline all the time. Educate adolescents and to prevent and to treat. If you have trouble you can't stop and you want to help stop it, I can help. I got a lot to say. I got a lot more to say.
Hey everybody, here we are. We also are setting up a Clubhouse at the same time. People want to check that out. Go on to Clubhouse, raise your hand. And if I bring you up to the podium, you'll be streaming out on Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, Rumble, and YouTube. And we appreciate you all.
What does that music make you want to do?
The music for the show?
I remember when Cheeto Santino was on here and he said it sounded like a strip club or the beginning of a porn.
Makes me want to do the show. Caleb selected it. Caleb, how did you select that music?
I like it.
It definitely wasn't in a strip club, so yeah.
I'm not sure. Just because Cheeto's looking for a funny angle. Yeah. All right. Fair enough. All right, guys. So look, all is good. We've got a lot to talk about today. I'm taking your calls over on Clubhouse. We had a great guest planned for today. We had to reschedule him, Vinay Prasad.
But he's a doctor.
But I do want to bring up some of the stuff that I was going to bring up with him today. We'll sort of chew on some of this material. But before I do, I want to get some of you up here. You had questions. Your hands are up on the YouTube.
Yeah, we always have a lot of people with their hands up.
Yes.
Not enough time.
All right, let's do it. So Noelle, let's see what Noelle's got on her mind. Noelle, are you there?
Give her a sec. There's a lag.
There she is. Oh, hold on. Wait, Noelle. Hang on.
Oh, no. So nobody heard the intro.
Apparently not. All right, Noelle, try that again. Here we go.
They won't get my joke then.
You're on mute, but let's try it again. There you go.
Is it working now?
Then we got it. Thank you. That was my fault. My mess. Right. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, I just had a question. I took my kids to their well child checks last month, and we were talking about the COVID vaccine for kids. And I asked him if once the FDA or CDC or whatnot approves something and makes it available, do doctors get to look at all the studies that went into making that decision? And he said that no, they don't always get access to that. And I just wanted to ask you, is that true?
So the way I would have answered that question was, we have no way of knowing all the studies they looked at, right? We don't really know what they were presented as the defense or the evidence for approval. Now, we are supposed to keep up on all the research that's published and peer-reviewed and available. So many of us have seen lots of literature. They may be considering sort of preprints and things that haven't been published yet that we would not yet see, okay? But people have got to get a better understanding of what FDA approval means. It doesn't mean a doctor is going to do something. It means that the drug company can bring something to market with specific parameters set by the FDA. What each physician does with each patient is up to that patient-doctor combination, period. Now, there may be mandates from outside in order to do certain things, like go to school, get a measles vaccine, things like that. But whether a treatment is given has almost nothing to do with the FDA. We use treatments all the time. Aspirin has not been FDA approved. We use treatments all the time that are FDA approved, and we do use medication that are FDA approved outside of their narrow band of FDA approval, which is what the drug company must abide by, but we are under no obligation to abide. Now, if something goes wrong because of our decision, we can get in more trouble if we're using something so-called off-label outside of FDA approval. But if we can defend that decision reasonably, there is no problem using things off-label. So what the FDA does or doesn't do should be a guide for us, but shouldn't necessarily determine what a doctor does for a patient. So you get that?
Yes, and I guess more of my question was, when a new drug does come to market,
Yep.
or the COVID vaccine is approved for children, do you get to see all the details of the studies that go into that? Because it just seems like
you don't. As I'm saying, a lot of it is pre-print, right? So we don't know what the drug company presents to the FDA. We know what's in print. We are supposed to keep up on all the published data, and that may or may not include everything that goes to the FDA, right? But so let's talk about what we do know. We do know that there's roughly a 1 in 7,000, 6,800, 1 in 6,800 risk of myocarditis in young males from the vaccine. Okay. Now, most of that data is on adolescents. We really don't have a lot of data on children yet, but the presumption is that there'll be similar kinds of risks, and there is some data on children, so the risk looks about the same. So it's about 1 in 7,000 case of myocarditis. Now, of those cases thus far, of which there's not been a lot, mostly because there's not been a lot of children vaccinated, but at 1 per 7,000, most of it appears to be mild and reversible. The concern is that as we start to get into the bigger numbers, you're going to see more moderate to severe myocarditis with potential for real complications. That's the concern. And that's what your doctor has to measure against your individual child's risk of COVID, which is approaching zero, right? There are, what, 300 children die in the country or something from COVID? I mean, the chance of having serious problems from COVID in a healthy child is remote. So has your doctor sat down and talked to you about this?
No, he hasn't talked about specific risks to age groups or anything. He did mention that he was going to recommend that all of his patients get the vaccine, though.
So there's a overriding motivation to get the vaccine, which is we need to stop this virus from replicating, right? So there's the individual risk. There's the individual risk of side effect. There's the individual risk of COVID. And then there's the collective risk, of which your child is a part of, that if this virus continues to replicate, something bad could develop, something really nasty could develop. And so you have to kind of consider all three in what you decide to do for your child. Have you decided what you want to do yet?
I guess, well, we were thinking of, yes, doing the vaccination, but really waiting to see what happened first.
Okay, that's reasonable.
Yeah.
That's a very good way to approach it. That's what I did with my kids with the chickenpox vaccine. I think I'm a vaccine enthusiast, to say the least, but I'm still, vaccines are not without the risk. That's all. And so I'd like to understand that risk before I do it. And when my kids were little, there had been a series of adverse reactions in Japan. And I thought, I wonder if we're going to really see more of this or not. We didn't. It would have been fine to have gotten the kids vaccinated. They got chickenpox, and so did Susan. And everybody's fine. But
I wish we had it.
But I had a similar approach with my own kids to what you're
triplets.
doing.
Okay,
Well,
3 kids with chickenpox at the same time.
The difficulty, Noelle, is that in Los Angeles, there are mandates coming. That you're being forced to take the vaccine, and so the decision making is being taken away from the parents and the doctor. And because there are going to be some side effects, that's going to be an interesting problem for the mandates, it seems to me. But that's a whole other matter. What do you feel about it generally?
Just the vaccines in general?
Yeah.
I have some mixed feelings, because at the beginning we were told, they're 90, 80% effective, whatever.
Yep.
And,
Yep.
My husband just read something that says, oh yeah, now our vaccines are 43% effective. And I am not personally aware of a vaccine with so many boosters. And this is also a question I've asked on Clubhouse twice before, is I'm confused as to, we have this global pandemic. We needed to do something about it. Why did we not go with the tried and true, conventional vaccine where you have a weakened or dead virus? And why did we decide to go with this brand new technology to tackle something?
You know why?
Serious?
There was actually a reason. So
please tell me.
Yeah. So first of all, we do have the traditional platform. That's the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. And you see that one has got its own problems, right? Yes?
Right. But was the Johnson & Johnson the actual actual COVID-19 in it?
No, but it still was a more traditional platform. And then the Novavax is another traditional platform, which is exactly like the pertussis vaccine in your tetanus shot. So the Novavax is also a traditional platform. Doesn't look very good, though. It doesn't look like it's having much success. But I thought it was going to be better than it was. It's not looking that great. So Novavax has problems. J&J, these are the more traditional style vaccines. The reason they went with the mRNA so quickly is that's the only thing that could be developed and scaled up on the speed in which they were doing it. The mRNA vaccines, from a manufacturing standpoint, can be massively scaled up incredibly quickly. So that was the reason. It really was that they could do it with the mRNA vaccines.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for answering that.
All right, good question. Is your last name Portuguese?
No, it's Italian.
Italian, because I have a friend of mine named Farina, and he was with an H, though, A-A-H-A, and he was a Portuguese. So I'm just curious. Okay, thank you, Noel. Good questions. I'll move you back to the audience, and we are still going along here and asking more questions. This is, I'm not quite sure what your name is. Let me see if it comes up here. Greg Ellis, is that you sitting there? Is that the Greg I'm seeing? It looks kind of like you. Okay, this is a name that is not coming through.
That'd be cool. Come on early.
Your hand is up. Is that you? It is Greg Ellis. Hold on, David. Hold on a second.
Sure.
Greg, I'm going to invite you to speak in just a second. Go ahead, David.
So, quickie question, Dr. Drew. Have you read this retraction by the New York Times of the grossly misrepresented number of children, around 900,000, who were hospitalized for COVID, when in reality, the number was closer to 63,000? And if you did indeed see that, how do you respond to that kind of alarm being created and then a retraction being done so much later?
Would disgust be a strong enough feeling about it? I see the panic porn wherever they can generate it. If I hear the word grim or staggering one more time, I'm going to put needles in my eyes. The rush to panic is just out of control. And the fact that they I did not read. I knew this happened. I knew that there was a correction. I didn't read the correction, so I specifically haven't read it because I was disgusted by the whole thing. I didn't want to know. I didn't care. But what makes me crazy is the vigor with which they present the retraction, of course, is orders of magnitude less vigorous than the original headline, which they are so gratified by putting out. The panic, as I look back on this thing, the one thing that I was spot on about and has been most disturbing to me is the panic. Panic never makes things better. It has been on the level of disgust that we have been so panic driven and panic. Not only have we been panic prone, but we have been driven to panic by the press. And rather than keeping a positive attitude and looking to the experts to get this thing done, and let's get through this. It's awful, but we're going to get through it. To whimper and shelter in place as though that's a virtue is deeply, deeply concerning to me. This has been awful. It has been, but it's been made far, far, far more awful by examples like this. And you need go no further than the mental health data out there. I interviewed somebody yesterday. You can see it on our thread, who presented some of the data for women and children, and particularly children like 5 to 15, the depression, the anxiety, the suicide, the substance use, off the chart. I don't know if we'll, fourth grade reading levels, pathetic. I mean, we really have damaged half a generation without an apology or without any plan for what we're going to do about it.
You learned that yesterday, right?
I knew it was happening. I didn't have the specific numbers. I saw it. I see it happening myself, and it's beyond reproach.
We had a good guest yesterday.
Thanks, David.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Tom.
Greg Ellis, to get you up here, man.
You're a better guest now.
I know. Greg, aren't you coming on this show soon? Or am I going on your show? Something. We're doing something together.
Hey, Drew, we're doing both. You're coming on mine, I'm coming on yours. How great. And by the way, can I just say, that segue from the panic, it was about 14, 15 months ago. I talked about the panic-demic. I was more concerned about the panic-demic than the pandemic.
Me too.
It's literally, I mean, look, close to 800,000 people die by suicide every year. That's one every 40 seconds. And this social isolation and the messaging that we've been told, social distancing rather than physical distancing and social connectedness, it's so important. It's so important. The well-being of people, particularly psychologically and not just physically, which we talk about a lot. And I listen to you and thank you for all your information. It's so vital. And your rooms, I have to say, I've been in a couple and listened to a lot. You know what it is? It's well moderated with moderation. You provide information to people, not from a bias, not from one side or the other. And just thank you for that, Drew.
Well, thanks, Greg. I'm accused of constantly being on one side or the other, and so I try to check myself. I try to make sure I'm just given the facts, and then I have an emotional reaction. That maybe that's my mistake to share the reaction. In other words, by being disgusted over the New York Times being so illegitimate in their reporting, does that make me one side or another? If it does, I guess it does. It's just that I cannot stand what has happened to the press. I can't stand it. It's just I'm just disgusted. And I'm worried because I've been a part of it. You know, I was on CNN for 6 years and I created lots of programming that has been morphed into things that they are now, that has gone into outer space. And there just is, I don't like a world where there's no respect for the truth. That is deeply, deeply worrying to me. And the other thing, Greg, I want to ask you this, because you have roots, you know, in other countries. This happened worldwide. It's one thing if it just happened here, I could really take aim at what I saw happen. But it's weird to me that the entire world adopted a similar attitude. Why do you think that is? Are they just following the United States so diligently that here we go, what we do, the world does, as goes the U.S., so goes the world? Or is there something, and I'm leading the witness a little bit here, is there something going on in our personalities, our emotional landscapes, in our relationships that set us up for this?
That's a great question. Gosh, I mean, look, being from the UK, I've seen what's happened with the UK and the lockdowns and the veracity by which there's been these emergency powers. I've seen what's happened in Australia, particularly New South Wales.
My God,
it's been shocking to see the videos of that.
Yeah.
I think yesterday, or maybe this morning, there was a woman in her local park with a mask who went to exercise, sat down on a bench for a cup of tea, and 7 police officers grabbed her, turned her over, violently threw her to the ground.
I saw it.
I mean, this is a level of police state, which the likes of which I hadn't seen in my lifetime, and I think is more accessible because of social media.
Right.
But I do think this the panic-demic. When I look at the masquerade, if you will, the mask charade of it's one, it's two, it's none, it's inside, it's out. Someone's going to do a parody song about it.
Yeah.
It's so difficult for people. And I think, I had Stephen Fry on my show back in May last year, and he made a very good point. He talked about epidemiologists and virologists, and he said that anyone who is sure of themselves, particularly who's a virologist and epidemiologist, do not listen to them because they don't know what they're talking about.
Right.
It's ever changing, right? Like you talk about the replication of the virus. These are like science is emergent truths. We're getting new information daily. So how do we get access to that information, I think, is key.
Oh, you packed a lot into that. So if you want to hear a really good discussion, I was going to have Vinay Prasad on here. He has a podcast called Plenary Sessions, which I was listening to before COVID. He's just a brilliant physician researcher. And he has his podcast that's up right now. It's a bunch of mini podcasts, and he really digs into these issues. I strongly recommend you guys listen to it, even as a primer for when I do get him next week. But the idea here that
everybody pray.
Yeah. The idea that people can be sure of themselves in biological sciences, anyone who's a clinician knows you never say never, you never say always. We're deeply trained and entrenched in that thinking, because biology is a probability equation. It's like trying to predict cloud formation. We're trying to do the best we can, but we know there's going to be lots of error, lots of distribution, lots of scatter, lots of things we're uncertain about. And if you are certain about anything in a biological realm, you are certain to be wrong. That's number one. Number two, the mask charade, which I love the framing of that. How come we're not having a massive outbreak right there, like right now? Because Dr. Fauci predicted on MSNBC a massive outbreak with people going to football games. Why didn't the football games cause massive outbreaks? Now, A sensible and somewhat information-based point of view would have been, we only have like 4 cases of documented transmission of the virus outside in the world. Out of the tens of millions of cases, 4 cases. I bet if the stadiums are outdoor and well ventilated, it's going to be a low probability of transmission. So people outdoors can gather, probably. Maybe not, we'll see, but probably. Now, we've had a massive experiment, particularly down in the South during college football games. 90,000 people crammed into stadiums, no uptick. In fact, continued downturn. So I think we can at least determine that the virus is going to do what the virus does, particularly when it comes to outdoor gatherings, number one. Number two, on Dr. Prasad's plenary sessions, he reviews the mask data. And he really talks about whether the data is good or bad. The problem is there's good data that has been called bad data, based on my understanding of what he analyzes. And the data, at best, shows about a 15% effect of masks in best data. And that's not nothing, that's not zero, but that's not stopping transmission. It's not you're a killer if you don't wear a mask. It's about 15, 20%. Check out the Bangladesh study, check out the Danish study published in Annals of Internal Medicine. These were good studies. They were highly criticized because people didn't like the outcome. And so that's been one of the horrible things about this pandemic is people have started reasoning from conclusion. So rather than saying, masks aren't quite as effective as we thought they'd be, but they do something, let's keep doing it. Let's do something. Because if there are going to be 800,000 deaths, 10% of 800,000, still that's 80,000 lives. Come on now, let's go do something. But don't treat people that have their mask over their nose like a murderer, or not over their nose. And my final point, and then I'm going to get back to you, Greg, is the NHS at the UK came out with some data, I think it was 2 days ago, where they concluded, and I want to get your opinion on, did you see this data and what do you think about it? Because it kind of surprised me. They were looking back, they were doing some of the initial retrospective analysis of how we did during the pandemic, which I thought was a great idea. But they concluded that the most serious error of the pandemic was during the era when Boris Johnson wasn't locking things down, and there should have been an earlier, more severe lockdown. Now, they didn't specify, could they have done a shorter period of time? Might it have been a shorter lockdown? What the goal would have been of the early lockdown necessarily. But their conclusion was that they did just about everything pretty well, except this delay in lockdown. What say you, Greg?
Gosh, I don't know too much about who did that study. Or
NHS, the NHS. It was an NHS publication.
Wow. Well, it's surprising for me to hear that the NHS has gone against the government.
Interesting.
Well,
they're going against Boris Johnson, to be fair. I don't think Boris Johnson is particularly popular with the NHS.
Yeah, I'm just checking that out now. It's a serious early error and a fatalistic approach.
Yeah.
I want to go back to what you said about that reductive reasoning from conclusion backwards. That, to me, that reminds me of, we've talked a little bit about cancel culture, that guilty till proven innocent. And it seemed to me, I'm not going to call it COVID woke, but the new diseased until proven healthy mentality. It's that perfect storm, and to a degree, I think the unvaccinated aren't prolonging the pandemic. I think governments are prolonging the pandemic. And I read today someone who said that it was more endemic than pandemic now. We have to learn how to live with it.
Yeah.
And I think there's truth in that. Would you agree?
Oh, 100%. Listen, as soon as there's a weird battle forming right now, it is around the antiviral medication. So Merck is trying to get approval of molnupiravir. Pfizer has a product. These are expensive drugs. It's been expensive for them to do the research, so the drugs are going to be expensive, but they are on the order of efficacy of antibiotics. So if you get a strep throat, you take an antibiotic, you can expect to get better. If you get a urinary tract infection and you take an antibiotic, you can expect to get better. It wasn't that way until 1970s. In the past, you would die of urosepsis, you would get rheumatic fever, you'd get rheumatic heart disease. If you had a strep infection in your throat, it changed the world. Let's move forward to HIV. They developed antiviral drugs that were vilified at first. If you remember, the Dallas Buyers Clubs insisted that no one take it because the AZT was causing AIDS. It was portrayed a little bit in the movie, but it was a really serious problem. And we had something we could really do for people to help them, and they were being told not to take it. When we figured out another antiviral and we put these antivirals together, AIDS was overnight turned from a death sentence to a chronic illness. We're going to see something like that with the antivirals, therapeutics that come up on board soon for coronavirus. The war that's brewing is people are saying it is just a pharma scam. It is just trying to put I can't even say the drug, the Iver drug. I can't even say it on this stream or I'll be canceled. It's trying to put that drug on a cheap available drug away, so so we can make our money. And somebody came on this stream yesterday who I'm going to speak to, and said this was what she called it, pharmaco world. She called it like a world war of pharmaco something. Pharma was waging war on humanity essentially. I'm here to tell you, the antivirals are going to turn this thing into an endemic disease that doctors treat easily. That's what's going to happen. So you're going to have a vaccine, so the illness is mild and less likely to transmit. You're going to have monoclonal antibodies if somebody breaks through, and you're going to have antivirals, which you just take as soon as you get sick, once we understand that this is a safe drug. And the FDA is working on that right now. So we're nearly fully, it is becoming more endemic for sure. We do, and I would say it's the vaccines and the monoclonal antibodies that have made it endemic now, but it's going to become truly endemic once we have therapeutics. Now, this idea that you've seen flying around that the vaccines are going to cause accelerated mutations by putting evolutionary stressors on the virus, vaccines don't tend to do that. Therapeutics do that. So there will be a need for putting viral medicine. That's why we have to put viral medicines together. That's why you have to have 2 or 3 of them together, because it does put evolutionary pressure on the virus, and they do figure out ways to get around the therapeutics. So that's going to be where that problem kicks in. So yes, Greg, endemic, it's getting there, it's close, and we have treatments, and that's what really makes something endemic.
Yeah, great points. When you ask me about the UK as well, what comes to mind is the consent for 12 to 15-year-olds. I think it's the Milgram consent, it's called, which usurps the parents' rights to decide for their children whether they get vaccinated. That concerns me deeply.
Well, now let me stop you. Is it called the Milgram consent as an homage to the Milgram experiment?
No, it's not Milgram. It's something else. I got that wrong. It's not the Milgram experiment.
But I have heard people I have heard Milgram's name applied to some of the draconian stuff that's going on for the very reason. Those of you who don't know, the Milgram experience was a famous Stanford was the prison guard one. A famous Yale biology.
Yeah, the Stanford one was the Stanford experiment, wasn't it?
Right, and that's the one that's been shown to be maybe a sham, by the way. The Milgram, not. The Milgram was for real. And it was showing how people respond to authority, essentially. It's that experiment where they take unknowing subjects, they put them at a counter, they say you're going to give it's a learning paradigm, you're going to give electric shocks to this poor subject who's in another room. You can't see them, but you can hear them. And the shocks get more and more severe to the point that what they start hearing, the subject starts hearing from that room is, I have a heart problem, I can't breathe, I'm chest pain. And the experimenter goes, go on, keep going. Give more stimulation, give more electricity. And most people do it, which is pretty crazy. And that's very similar to some of the things that are going on today. There is sort of a Milgram phenomenon today, that's for sure.
Yeah, so my faux pas, my word salad faux pas, I don't remember the name, but basically they've given consent. The government has decided that 12 to 15-year-olds can have their own autonomy of their medical consent.
Yeah.
That concerns me. And I was concerned as well, Drew, with, I'm pro-vaccines, but President Biden mandating medical procedures on the citizenry is, I think, somewhat Orwellian. I know that's it's a little extreme to say, but I think we should encourage people to get vaccinated, recommend vaccination, implore them even, incentivize them if you like, and inform people and educate people and give people as much data and information and documents and reports and studies as possible. But federal enforcement and making employment conditional on vaccine injection, I just think is wrong. And it kind of it's the beginnings of a two-tiered society where those people, because I think there is a small
but vocal section of people who like to be the best at following the rules and telling everyone what the rules are.
Yeah.
And I think when it comes down to individual choice, like I think it was Noelle who was just on, and she said, she isn't sure about whether to for her kid. She's going to wait. I think the way we use words as well into pro-vax, anti-vax. Like, people are curious, people are hesitant, and people are information hungry. And I think that's good, and we should encourage that. But as you well know, we don't live in a society with a lot of nuance and doubt. We live in this world where you're one or the other, you're either or, you're for or against. And I think the more we can have people like you speaking, as long as you can find a non-censorious platform that you won't get banned by saying the I word.
We're worried about YouTube, but
So far, so good.
We're on Rumble now, so.
Yeah, our friends over at Rumble, by the way, we appreciate you guys.
But I totally agree with him. Didn't I say this to you last week? That I said, maybe once a week we need to give out really good information about COVID.
Yes, you did. Yes, you did.
And because there's just nothing out there, and people are totally ignorant of what's going on. They have so many questions.
Well, they're not ignorant. They're just fearful, and they don't know what information source to rely upon.
Well, not everybody, but there's a lot of people who just put their heads in the sand, don't want the vaccine, just want to move forward, but then they're being told they have to do something. They're getting arrested. They're getting knocked out. It's.
Well, let me, Greg, as always, lays up these comments that make me want to say more.
Drew's really looking forward to interviewing you.
I know. Well, here we are. We're well into it.
This is the pre-interview interview.
I'm going to make you go away because we're going to.
Yeah, we don't want to leave it in the hall.
Yeah, we're going to leave it all in the hall today. But mandates harden resistance. This stream, people on this stream probably know that I got into radio because in 1983, I was dealing with AIDS patients like crazy. We just started calling it AIDS. In 1982, we called it GRIDS. In 1983, we called it AIDS. We didn't have a causative agent yet, but we were getting a handle on the behavior that led to the transmission. And it was a powerful behavior that they couldn't figure out how to change. They couldn't figure out how to get people not to have sex. And one Anthony Fauci was advocating for young physicians like me to get into the media and start educating. I took that very seriously, and that's how I got involved in radio in 1983. That's what started me down that path. So I've been around Fauci for 4 decades.
Yeah, but you worked very hard to give good information out to people, and you did it for free for what?
For 10 years. I did it for free for 10 years because I thought it was important. It was interesting. It was fun. It was different.
And then you did it for free after that too, but you had a pretty good run there.
That's true. I did it for free towards the end there too. But point being that's what got me into all this. And across the landscape of AIDS, we learned how to change behavior. We study cases. We create narratives. We use humor and music. You don't tell me, and you notice me in a box on high telling people what to do. Zero probability of working. It's actually why I got involved with Teen Mom, because I knew that 16 and Pregnant and Teen Mom, by showing the cases, the consequences of those kids' lives, would decrease teen pregnancy. And you can now document 2 things: that the teen pregnancy in this country started falling the quarter that at 16 and Pregnant started airing. And they have 2 academic studies that show the higher the viewership of Teen Mom, the lower the incidence of teen pregnancy. So it worked. We know how to do this. It's not by saying, don't get pregnant, use birth control. It's like, let me show you what happens when you don't. And that brings me to 2 other points, which is this follow the science acronym, which is out now, that really is essentially just a placeholder for do what I say. Follow the science has no meaning in science. There's no world where scientists sit down and say, follow the science. That's authoritarian. We say, here's the numbers. Tell me what you think. Do you agree with my reasoning? Follow the science. That term has become so distorted that I again, Vinay Prasad has a lot of feelings about this. He's written some articles on it. I will get into it with him next week. Now, Greg, what do you have any feeling as it pertains to helping people get vaccinated or unvaccinated with the way Colin Powell's death has been reported, which is a tragedy? That man was a national treasure, and he died. Do you have any? What was your takeaway from how that was reported?
Yeah, I agree with you about Colin Powell. And what saddened me was that rather than, and I nearly tweeted about this. I don't tweet that often. I nearly put something out there, but my thought was this: when I read some of the comments and the politicization of the vaccine and him and his death, was to just say, look, this let's look at this man's life and celebrate the great public service, whether you align with him politically or not. What an amazing individual and what an amazing life, and how sad for him and his family. And let's celebrate his life and mourn his death. That was where I came from. These people who were trying to argue either or side was just, it just made me a bit sad.
And let's be clear. He was 84 with multiple myeloma. The Kaplan-Meier curve on that is about 5 years. You get about 5 years at that age with myeloma. They're not telling us what age. I found it interesting that they wouldn't tell us what age he was diagnosed. I'm betting it was not last month. I'm betting it was 3 to 5 years ago. So his clock was running out, COVID or no COVID, vaccine or no vaccine. And that biological reality is not what's being discussed. This is a real serious problem. People at the end of life are fragile, and a little thing can steal them of 6 months one way or another. That's for sure. COVID does that. And now we're learning, even if you're vaccinated, that might happen. Would I have given Colin Powell another booster vaccine in the face of myeloma therapy if he had a tough time with the vaccine, which I don't know, maybe he did? No, I probably wouldn't. Mostly because making him sick from the vaccine, if he's fragile enough, could be a serious problem. I'll take my risk because he only got a few months to go anyway if he's been sick with myeloma for 5 years. So this kind of sort of reasoning isn't shared with anybody. That's the part that drives me crazy.
Good long life. 83 is
84.
Good.
Oh my God.
Your dad was 83, right?
And 5 years of myeloma. This is the point, is that you don't live forever with
cancer.
myeloma. And it's like,
he's doing great.
And so I don't know, did he? And what was the treatment?
Why do you have to die of COVID when you've had cancer for 5 years? I don't get it.
Because you're fragile. It could have been flu could have killed him as well.
Why do they have to call it you died of COVID when you've had cancer?
This is my point. You can't put it in a box. You don't get to put clinical biological events in a box like that. And both in terms of vaccine, not vaccine, COVID, not COVID death. So Greg, help me with this. And then I'm going to let you go.
Yeah. Before I move to the audience, look, what it brings up for me is I had a conversation with Brett Weinstein about 16, 15 months ago about the lab leak hypothesis. We were both concerned about that. That got quashed in the press because the president at the time wasn't the right president and there wasn't the right conversation. And all these months later, I'm reminded at that time, I think one of the things Brett and I talked about was the incentives, the hospital administrators in certain hospitals encouraging the cause of death if there was anything symptomatic of COVID.
But to be fair, but that was I'm going to push back on the reg and say that was a convention that everybody agreed upon, so hospitals could survive in the pandemic and continue to operate. So they were not just incentivized; they had to. That was the way they stayed open.
Did that end at any point? Was that ended?
Well, I don't know. Yes, I think it did. Yes, it just did. I believe it did. I think it ended, and the insurance companies and how they're looking. A lot of that stuff is sort of unraveled now. Yes, I think it has.
Good. Well, maybe I just haven't read too much about it or heard too much about it.
But you're right. But the point is the difference between an incentive and a survival technique. You know what I mean? We needed the hospital to survive. Everyone agreed they would take this convention. The problem is what people did with the data then. Then they took the data and said, look what we have here, as opposed to trying to interpret the data. It's very, this is the part that gets me crazy.
Before I go to the, I just want to say a couple of last things. So I thought about why we have this pandemic and why people are hesitant and curious, because for all my life I've taken vaccines. I go, why are people so hesitant? And I think that perhaps the first time in our history, the collective consciousness has been raised by this particular vaccine and the strain, and the citizenry are questioning what are they injecting into their bodies, rather than blindly allowing, some might say big pharma, or some might say what they're being told by to inject them en masse. And I think that's a good thing that people are curious.
I agree.
Putting in here? Go ahead.
Well, if we give the information to make good judgments, that's the thing.
Well, that's why it's so important. We have people like you, and to put out information that doesn't come from a place. Look, I'm going to say, when this pandemic started, I bought into 2 stocks, Zoom and Novavax. I'm probably going to sell Novavax tomorrow because of what you just said about 15 minutes ago about it.
I still think it's going to come out. I still think it's going to come out, and I think it's going to be useful. Don't get me wrong. It's just not quite what I thought it was going to be. At least
it's not as encouraging.
At least the trickle of information that I'm getting now, maybe that's distorted. I haven't seen a lot of good peer published review yet, but I'm hearing that it's like from people I trust that it may not be what we hope for. So yes, that might not be.
Well, let's hope that expectations have been lowered and they continue to impress. And the last thing,
don't take investment advice from me right now. That's not what we're doing here. So go ahead.
Yeah, when it suddenly just skyrockets in a year's time, I'm like,
right. Could happen.
I just want to quickly say, you put me in touch. I know this is unrelated, but you put me in touch with Eric Kramer, former ex-NFL quarterback.
Yes, I did.
His story is going to be out on Sunday on my show, The Respondent.
Right.
And, some of the quotes and some of the things he says, I'm just grateful that you put me in touch with him. He placed a gun under his jaw and pulled the trigger. The bullet went through his chin, up through his tongue, nasal cavity, narrowly missed his optic nerve, through his brain, exited his skull. And the story after that gets even more dark and interesting and harrowing, but it's also a story of triumph over adversity. So I want to thank you for connecting.
Listen,
wonderful fellow.
I knew Eric before the gunshot wound, and I knew what some of his struggles were. And he called me and told me that story, and I was like, "Oh my God, Eric! I had no idea." I was floored. And you and I had just met, and I thought, "Oh, this would be an interesting pairing." And so thank you. And everybody, please go. Where do they get the pod?
So it's The Respondent at therespondent.com, and it's going to be live on YouTube, premiering on Sunday at 1 p.m. Pacific time. And it basically, you make a great point. His 18-year-old son overdosed on heroin and died. His mother died of cancer. His father soon after. And then he attempted suicide. And then it gets even more. We get into conservatorship, and he was coerced into marriage, and then family law, and he was accused of domestic violence and faced felony domestic violence charges. So, yeah, he's a wonderful guy. It's an amazing story, and it highlights so many of the ills, the systemic ills of our institutions, particularly the legal system. So, yeah, 1 p.m. Sunday, Eric Kramer.
And as a prep for that interview, you might want to Wikipedia Phileas Gage, the case of Phileas Gage, which was the guy in 1870 or so, had a railroad tampering rod go through his eye and skull and injure a similar part of the brain. And you kind of see the spectrum of what happens when people get those sorts of brain injuries. It's also
astonishing. He was one of the most famous patients in neuroscience, I think, maybe the most famous.
Well, and it's come under scrutiny lately, but I'm telling you, it fits the biology. You could also look at the description in Anthony Damasio's book, Descartes' Error. It was also a great book about the brain, Descartes' Error. I recommend it strongly. And he talks about Phileas Gage's case there in great detail. Greg, thank you. Thank you for talking to my friend Eric. This story is worthy of everybody listening to it. It is a story of the spirit, I think. And it'll blow your mind. It'll just blow your mind.
I agree. And he, he's just a wonderful guy, and how he's come back. So thank you for that. Thank you for having me up for this pre-interview interview. And I look forward to seeing you very soon.
Greg, we'll do.
Drew.
Take care.
Keep up the great work.
Thank you, buddy. Bye. Great, Greg Ellis. Why don't I take a break right now? And what we'll do is, I've got lots of hands up here. I will get to as many of you guys as I can. Those of you that are new in the clubhouse, anyone that does come up to the podium to talk will be streaming out on Rumble, YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, and Facebook. And so just know that you're consenting to that by coming up and speaking on the mic. I've got about 6, 7 people with hands up here. I'll try to get to as many of you as I can.
And by the way, Greg's going to be on our podcast next Friday at 3 p.m.
This stream.
This Friday.
This stream.
He'll be on Ask Dr. Drew. We're doing all Ask Dr. Drew
4 p.m.
this week.
4 p.m. on October 22nd.
Friday the 22nd.
Yes, I'm seeing that on my schedule. I'm looking at it. Yep, Greg will be back on Friday.
You'll get to see him.
Oh, shoot. Greg, I'm going to put Greg up because I want to tell him one more thing. Greg, I want you to think about something. I meant to say it before we started talking about Eric Kramer. All right, Greg, there? Yeah. Unmute yourself. You're muted.
I'm here.
Okay, we started asking about how the world got so taken by panic. I want you to think about histrionic personality characteristics, narcissism and histrionic. The only period of history that I can find that compares to this is essentially 1780s France, both from the standpoint of the kinds of childhood injuries that result in narcissism and the mob actions that followed. Now, if there's something going on where people with large groups of people with narcissism and childhood injuries get together, they become hysterical in mobs, and they start having delusional thinking. And the reason I've said this on the stream before, the reason I started thinking about this, I thought, my God, everyone is telling me that there's Nazis down the street and the president's a Russian operative. And if somebody come in my office and said, talk to me about Nazis and Russian, sort of operatives that they knew were, that leaders were Russian bots, I would put that person in a psychiatric hospital. 5 years ago, that person would be admitted for delusional thinking. Now, it's a collective delusion that is sort of passed off as, oh, well. So think about that for next Friday.
I will. I've actually thought a little bit about this, the collective Munchausen's by proxy, and the 1780s France is a good one. I think that moving towards that panic epidemic that we are raging against the machine.
Yep.
And also that, the narcissism of the individual,
yep.
and how victimhood has become somewhat of a new social currency.
See, to me, that's all.
And its economy is booming.
It's all the same.
It's all interconnected.
That's all interconnected, right? So that's what I want to talk to you about on Friday. Okay.
Great.
All right.
Look forward to it.
To that.
Thanks, Drew.
All right. We'll take a little break, and I'll come back to you with more of your calls right after this. I want to give a shout out to our good friends at Blue Mics. If you've heard my voice on this show anytime over the past year, including right now, you've been listening to Blue microphones. And let me tell you, after more than 30 years in broadcasting, I don't think I have ever sounded better. But you don't need to be a pro or have a fancy studio to benefit from a quality mic. You may not realize it, but if you've been working from home or using Zoom to chat with friends, you probably spend a lot of time in front of a microphone. So why not sound your best? Whether you're doing video conferencing, podcasting, recording music, or hosting a talk show, Blue has you covered. From the USB series that plugs right into your computer to XLR professional mics like the Mouse or the Blueberry we use in the studio right now. Bottom line, there's a Blue microphone to fit your budget and need. I can't say enough about Blue mics, and once you try one, you will never go back, trust me. To take your audio to the next level, go to drdrew.com/blue. That is drdrew.com/BLUE. Anyone who's watched me over the years knows that I'm obsessed with Hydrolite. In my opinion, the best oral rehydration product on the market. I literally use it every day. My family uses it. When I had COVID, I'm telling you, Hydrolite contributed to my recovery, kept me hydrated. Now, with things finally reopening back around the country, the potential exposure to the common cold is always around. And like always, Hydrolite has got your back. Hydrolite Plus Immunity, my new favorite, starts with their fast-absorbing electrolytes and adds a host of great ingredients. Plus, each single-serving easy-pour drink mix contains 1,000 milligrams of vitamin C, 300 milligrams of elderberry extract. Hydrolite Plus Immunity comes in convenient, easy-to-pour sticks that rapidly dissolve in water, make a great-tasting drink, has 75% less sugar than your typical sports drink. Uses all natural flavors, gluten-free, dairy-free, caffeine-free, non-GMO, and even vegan. Hydrolite Plus Immunity is also now available in ready-to-drink bottles at the Walmart next to the pharmacy, or as always, you can find it by visiting hydrolite.com/drdrew. Again, that is hydrolite.com/drdrew. Be sure to use the code DrDrew25 for a special discount. Here with my daughter Paulina to share an exciting new project. Over the years, we've talked to a ton of young people about what they really want to know about relationships.
It's difficult to know who you are and what you want, especially as a teenager. And not everyone has access to an expert in their house like I did. Of course, it wasn't like I was always that receptive to that advice.
Right, no kidding.
But now we have written the book on consent. It is called It Doesn't Have to Be Awkward, and it explores relationships, romantic relationships, and sex.
It's a great guide for teens, parents, and educators to go beyond the talk and have honest and meaningful conversations. It Doesn't Have to Be Awkward will be on sale September 21st.
You can order your book anywhere books are sold. Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Target, and of course your independent local bookstore. Links are available on drdrew.com.
So pre-ordering the book will help people, raise awareness, obviously, and it'll get that conversation going early so more people can notice this and spread the word of positivity about healthy relationships. So if you can, we would love your support by pre-ordering now.
Totally. And as we said before, this is a book that both teenagers and their parents should read.
Read the book, have the conversation. It doesn't have to be awkward. On sale September 21st. We are back. Let's get right off to the phone lines again. Susan, everything good from your standpoint?
Yeah, everything's good. My plumber's at the house and the lockbox was open and the keys weren't inside. That's all. I'm good. Okay. I really like that conversation. I really appreciate him joining us.
Yeah, every time I talk to Greg, it elevates my thinking.
I'm dual tasking. I know you know I'm not very good at that.
So. But I that's really what I want to know, if you thought that was worthy.
No, I love it. I can't wait to hear more on Friday.
Yeah, he's a good thinker. He's written a book about family courts and that system.
Yes.
Maybe put that book up there for him. I don't know
I don't know if he's ready for that.
What's that?
I don't know if he can right now. But
no, for you. You just look it up on.
No, I know it's the
maybe
it's on family law and yeah, it's going to be a good conversation about that. Okay, I'm glad you remembered that.
The book is called The Respondent. The Respondent. Yeah. And Caleb, maybe you have a little screenshot for that. But let me go ahead and
He'll get it.
Okay. Let me go ahead and get some callers up here. I can't see. This is Joe Wahal.
Easy for you to say.
Yeah, Joe Wahal. Help me with that.
Just call me Narwhal.
Narwhal. Okay, excellent. Narwhal is easier.
Drew. Hey, thanks for having me up. So I'm one of the lucky people that got vaccinated and then 2 months later got a breakthrough case of COVID.
Nice. Good times.
Yeah, it's awesome. And
the anointed one.
Yeah, now I'm also in the very rare club of being a long hauler 3 months later. I guess technically, I guess I'm a long hauler. Am I at 3 months? A long hauler?
You're people. The long haul target has moved. It was originally 3 weeks. So I think if you're sick for 3 months, you're good for a long haul label. Why not?
Yeah. So I would say basically what I have is post-viral fatigue syndrome is what I'm thinking.
Have you tried anything?
Well, so that's, I've talked to my GP, he's referred me to the long haul clinic at Kaiser. I'm just taking supplements.
I got to tell you, I had the same thing. I had two things. I had long haul fatigue and then long haul fogginess. And the fatigue was rapidly reversed with fluvoxamine. It was Steve Kirsch, who's an enthusiast for that drug, finally convinced me to try it. I had 0 side effects. And in 30 minutes, the ringing in my ears improved. And I just had a steady improvement in the resolution of that fatigue. And it was awful. I mean, it was really bad. So it's something to look into. Also, have you looked at the website, covidlonghaulers.com?
I will check it out.
It's a group, Dr. Yo, Dr. Patterson, and they're actually having a good deal of results. You can look at what they're saying there on the website. But they've been using, believe it or not, an ACE inhibitor, Pravachol, to help some people. Not
Are we allowed to say all these medicines on YouTube?
Yes, I'm allowed to talk about medicines. I'm a physician. I can talk about medicine.
Okay, I hope so.
This is insane.
Are you sure about that?
I know.
I don't know.
Oh my God.
I'm not kidding.
I am not telling him. I'm not telling him what to do. I'm saying to look into
the options are
and to discuss it with his physician.
Yeah.
And one of the theories is that classical monocytes are still manifesting spike protein particles as they enter the central nervous system and having some effect there of inflammation. And the thinking is the sigma-1 receptor, which is highly affected by fluvoxamine, may be the mechanism of reducing the inflammation in the brain. So you can look up the sigma-1 receptor in the brain. It gets a little complicated as you sort of read into that stuff. But I can just tell you anecdotally, I had a marked positive response. Many people have. I'm not sure what the incidence is. Like, it's not everybody that has a good response to it, but it's something to talk about with your doctor.
I feel terrible when people get that.
The long haul. It was bad. Oh, it's awful.
I know.
I see. So how would I get him to go about agreeing to do this?
Well, because he's in the Kaiser system, I don't know. That he may have administrative resistances that are different. He may have to apply to his pharmaceutical committee and things like that. Pharmacy, so-called PT&D, Pharmacy Therapeutic Committee. But something maybe you go in armed with some data and look at it and talk to them. The publications are out there. There was a nice study on fluvoxamine in JAMA from 10 months ago. So there's good decent research, and almost zero downside. Again, this is the thing that so many of these medications that can be repurposed that don't have specific FDA guidelines attached to them. We as physicians use them, i.e. aspirin, which is not an FDA approved drug.
Seriously?
It's not FDA approved drug.
Oh.
These are things we use to try to help patients when the risks are low. Do you have other, but I just went off on a diatribe. Did you something else motivate your call?
No, I mean, that was primarily it. I was just wondering if you knew, putting COVID aside, with post-viral fatigue syndrome generally, in your practice, is this something that subsides gradually? How long am I stuck with this?
I just talked to somebody today that's had it for close to 8-9 months, and I've seen people have it for a year, and I've seen people fail lots of treatments too. So it's a really treacherous, weird. I would say this though. We in my profession, I think, minimized the reality of post-viral syndromes. If you remember, you may not be old enough to remember, but there was a whole time when people talked about chronic Epstein-Barr, and then chronic fatigue syndrome, then chronic fatigue morphed into fibromyalgia. And as the terminology went along and the category broadened, I think a certain amount of skepticism developed along chronic viral syndromes. COVID has proven that to be an incorrect posture, that we should be very respectful and concerned about post-viral syndromes of all types, and we should be interested in figuring out ways to treat it. Now, the category of chronic fatigue and all the other monikers that have gone with it have always shown to have some benefit from SSRIs, which is why it caused some people to go, oh, it's just depression. No, it turns out that certain SSRIs are highly anti-inflammatory in the central nervous system through this sigma-1 system, most particularly fluvoxamine and Prozac. Those two medicines have very powerful stimulation of the sigma-1 system. So you can at least why don't you go to your doctor and say, I'm depressed? And maybe you can get him to prescribe it that way. Like, the fatigue is making me depressed. I feel like an antidepressant would help me. Maybe that's what's happening. We don't know, but it certainly does help people.
Okay. Yeah. I'm actually already referred out to psychology, psychiatry as well. So.
You talk about fluvoxamine and Prozac with those doctors, and they're very familiar and have low thresholds for using those medicines. So that's good news. Okay.
All right,
man.
Great.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Back to the phone lines here. This is, let me see if I can get the name, because everyone's got these funny
You are
monikers
killing it today.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I was quite excited to talk about Vinay Prasad. I had a lot of ideas in my head.
I know. But you're doing it for
Hiba?
Hi, yes. How's it going?
Good. How are you?
I'm well, thank you for asking. So I'm in Canada, and I really was hesitant to get vaxxed, primarily because we have such a high population, and I felt like I already had COVID, but I was never tested for it, unfortunately. Anyways, long story short, because of all the restrictions that they have placed on us, including pressure from work, I chose to get vaccinated. And this was like about 10 days ago where I had my first shots. And a couple of nights ago, while I was sleeping, I was awakened by extreme dizziness. And the first 2 days, I really had the regular symptom of, muscle ache at the site of where I was shot. But it was a full 10 days later when I was awakened by dizziness. And then I kept trying to go back to sleep. And as soon as I'd lay down on my left side, I would get dizziness again. So I was wondering, should I be concerned to get my second shot? I mean, my doctor is going to he's very much like, as many of the doctors here, they're
let me suggest this. And I'm not telling you what to do. You do it with your doctor, but there's no doubt in my mind that has something to do with the vaccine. The vaccine has all kinds of strange, the spike protein has all kinds of strange neurological correlates associated with it. Ringing in the ears, dizziness, facial palsies, a lot of cranial nerve stuff. Very strange. None of it's life-threatening. None of it is serious. It all goes away. So that's the good news. But you worry that next time it could be a much more severe reaction. One of the ways that they're mitigating these things is by separating the vaccines by more time. And there's actually some evidence that by getting, 4, 6, 8 weeks out, but we're talking about the mRNA vaccines, Hibba, right?
Yes,
yeah.
The Pfizer.
So there's some evidence that waiting longer actually enhances immunity and decreases the duration of immunogenicity. So what I would, if you were my patient, I would say, I really want to get you that second vaccine, but let's wait 6 weeks. Let's wait a while, and let's be on our toes next time. If you have certain reactions, we'll think of ways we can help you with that. But let a little more time pass. I've seen Monica Gandhi suggest that may be one of the ways of reducing myocarditis risk in young males. She is taking that position quite aggressively. That rather than taking the 12-year-old male and giving them vaccine, 3 weeks apart, let's do it 6 weeks apart, 8 weeks apart. And that seems to help reduce some of these side effects. Okay?
Thank you. Can I just ask you a quick question related?
Yeah.
I'm also taking rabiprazole. I've been on it for almost 2 months. Is there a chance it could be maybe an interaction or because of the medication I'm taking?
The omeprazole, is that the medicine you said?
Rabiprazole.
Yeah. Those medicines can cause dizziness by themselves. So hard to say, but I wouldn't worry about a severe interaction. I would not worry about a significant interaction. Okay.
Okay.
I think what you can think to yourself is, well, maybe it was the medicine caused the dizziness and not the virus, but not the vaccine rather. But I'd still wait. I'd hedge my bet a little bit. Plus, there seems to be some advantages to waiting longer between the mRNA vaccines. Now, she does bring up two interesting things I want to address. One is you can test for exposure. You can test for immunity to COVID. It's just not commercially available. It's not easily available. If you go to your doctor and say, I want to see if I've been exposed, he or she will essentially do an antibody screen. That's not a very good screen of anything. You can do, I for a long time told you about additive score. That's how you get a full spectrum of all the different antibodies that your B cells are producing and the neutralizing antibodies. The problem with the additive score and any other assessment of immunology, we have not done the research necessary to standardize. You know how we say, what's a normal sodium level? What's a normal thyroid level? That's called a standardization, a normal range of results. We haven't figured out that standard yet for COVID antibodies. We could, we're just not doing the research. And I don't know why, because there are more sophisticated ways of doing this than just vaccinating everybody. You can standardize immunity, test people. It's expensive, it's cumbersome, but people could show their immunity. You can also get tested. This is what they do in France. In France, they let you show your immunity, even though that's a kind of a vague notion still. I think we could do a better job with that. You can show your test results, and they have tests on every corner, or you can show your vaccine passport. When people have options, they loosen, they soften, and they're more likely to cooperate without all the hesitancy that people have today. Josh, let's see, I'll get Josh up here.
Dr. Drew.
Hey, what's up?
Not much. So yesterday you were talking about histrionic personality traits and aggression.
Yeah. And
then you adding narcissism to it today?
Well, histrionic is a narcissistic disorder. And so my question is, how did we know there's good evidence, there's good research to suggest that we've had a massive narcissistic turn in the last 30, 40 years. I mean, there was debate in the 19th century whether there was such a thing as a narcissistic personality. That's how far we've come from that. And we've clearly made that turn. My question is, how did we go from narcissism to more histrionic features? Why didn't we just
theory?
Go ahead.
About that. And actually it has to do with you.
Okay.
Loveline was a show that opened up discourse for sexual discussion. Mm-hmm. And my theory is that without that sort of national openness to sexuality and sexual discussion, that could be a cause. Because right now, if someone has a question, it's not just if they have a question, but it's not open. It's a closed system. It's in psychoanalysis, say a closed system, but it's really a place where people can't get these things, even thinking about them. I mean, the listeners of Loveline would constantly have to churn this stuff over in their mind, and it gave them a way to. The reason I'm saying that is because in histrionic, there's a mix-up between sex and proper ego functioning.
That's an old theory. That's not really thought to be accurate. You're really talking about conversion reactions and repression, all this stuff. That I don't know that a lot of people would agree that that's an accurate way to think about histrionic. Though I must admit, there are actually schools of thought that are trying to put everything on the cluster B under a narcissistic sort of label. And it's just the differing traits of narcissistic injury, essentially, or different strategies of dealing with narcissistic injury and dysregulation. So to sort of push it over to sexual repression, that was pertinent for a Victorian society that Freud found himself in 1850. There is not sexual repression now. So the idea that people don't have a place to go with their sexual material, this is the internet. They go with a lot. Maybe they were overstimulated with that stuff. But Josh, thank you. I've got a couple more calls I got to get to, and I want to be sure.
Oh, Drew, I got my Attitix score.
Yes, you did.
Let me send it to you.
Well, I got it too. I've seen it.
Oh, you saw it?
Yeah, it's not good.
What do you mean?
You have a 15. You have a 15 on the neutralizing antibodies, which means you need to. Oh, but that was before the booster. Yeah.
Yeah, it was before the booster.
That showed me you needed to get the booster.
Okay, so I had the booster last week. I couldn't wait for the score,
which was good. My instinct was right. You needed.
So I had
the
the Pfizer vaccine in January, and also both of them, and I ran out and got the booster because we're going to travel. But I'm glad I did now.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you did too. I had a hunch.
Even though it gave me diarrhea.
I had a hunch, and by the way, we are seeing some diarrhea from. I've talked to several people now with 2 weeks of diarrhea from the vaccine.
2 weeks. Yeah, my stomach hasn't been the same, but it's not that bad.
No, it's worth it. You're. I did not.
Remember when we got off the plane, I felt like I was going to throw up.
I'll tell you what. When I read your Attitix score, and here's what I got from it. You had okay antibody levels, but you had really good IgA levels, and IgA is the spike protein antibody that shows up in your nose to prevent infection. So you had some protection from that. You did not have good neutralizing antibodies, meaning if the virus get in, you couldn't neutralize it. Now, we don't have very good T cell assessment. There might be an army of T cells ready to back up that IgA. We don't know. I'd rather see you get boosted and get better neutralizing antibodies. It's just,
maybe Caleb will show the picture of it at the end of the show.
Okay, I'm going to get Jeff in here. Jeff, go ahead.
Hey, thanks, Dr. Drew.
You bet.
Hey, I got a question about vaccines and youth. I'm fully vaccinated, but my son is not, and I respect that and his reasonings. The thing that we're dealing with right now is that my grandson, he's 14, and he's a really great athlete, and he plays getting into high school ball and plays on select teams, and we're struggling right now trying to decide if it's him taking the vaccine is something that he should be doing at his age. The majority of the other players on his teams and in high school, they are vaccinated in the community that they live in. And so we're just really struggling with that. I know my son coaches baseball and basketball, and he's not allowed to do that unvaccinated.
Yeah, boy.
And then now the pressures with my grandson who, with all rights and purposes, he's an A-type personality kid. And, I don't want to see him struggle with feeling left out.
I know what you're saying. Yeah, but let's reason through. So your son is how old?
He's 32.
Okay, and he has not been vaccinated.
He is not vaccinated, and it's
And has he had COVID?
He thinks he has. I have advised him to go in and get the antibody test.
Yeah.
But he hasn't done that. He just has some philosophical differences, and trust me, I've tried to talk to him analytically about the science, but he's just not there yet, and that pours over onto his son.
Hold on now. So if is your son overweight or any other risk factors or anything?
Oh no, he's in great shape.
Have you appealed to him on the sort of group basis that we're trying to reduce the spread of this thing, and we want to
absolutely.
He does, and the replication and variants and all that. That doesn't appeal to him.
You know what? Not at this point. And then now with my grandson and sports and all of those things,
so
that's what I'm
with that kind of rigid thinking on his part for his own sort of vaccine status. It's going to be really hard to get him over to a teenager.
Right.
That's going to be very difficult. It seems to me that
what are the studies showing for teens for that age?
1 per 7,000 myocarditis. That's your number. Everything else looks pretty good. It is not a trivial decision. It's a serious decision that parents should take very seriously. Right. We're going to see, as we get into the tens and hundreds of thousands of vaccines for that age group, you're going to see more myocarditis. It's going to look a little more scary as we go forward. I have my instinct on this is for you to work on your son, and if you can get him vaccinated and he does well, that will soften his. And at very least, you could appeal to him saying, "Hey, do you want to? I guess you already have. You said, do you want to transmit it to your son, to these other kids? Is that really what you want to do? How would you feel if that happened?"
Yeah. Is there any studies that you can point me to in regards to teens and those type of things that you think might appeal to him?
The best discussions I've heard is from Vinay Prasad. You can go to his plenary session podcast. He's got he goes over the data there on many of his pods, and he cites the material. You can pull the citations that he goes over. That's the best. And I'm going to have him in here next week, hopefully. So that's the best stuff I know of. It's rough, man. Did you have the vaccine? Whoops. Did you have the vaccine yourself? We have to get this back. Hold on.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, because I got calls through.
I know.
Jeff, you still there?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Did you have the vaccine yourself?
Oh yeah, I did. I had the Johnson & Johnson, and I'm
you're fine. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I would just keep at him, keep working him. Do a lot of use the word wonderment a lot. Wonder. I wonder how you'd feel if you use that approach. Like, how are you going to feel? I wonder how that would work for you, and just make him think about the consequences of his choices, and let's see if we can get him to get the vaccine. Then I think you might see. Again, it'll be dependent what the community does around your grandson, of course. But these are really tough problems. These are really difficult problems, and as much as possible, you got to come at people not through the what is the word I'm looking for? Whether you're either on or off, this sort of digital sort of a binary. Don't come at them from a binary position. Come at them from a holistic position of how you make choices, what it looks like what goes one direction, what if it looks like if it goes another, and then get whatever data you can. See, maybe Dr. Prasad will have something on those podcasts. You guys, I got to call this person who just broke through here.
Did you see that question?
Which question?
About my immunity score.
What was the question?
Any idea what it was before getting any vaccination shot? The thing about my nose, the fact that her
zero
score was.
It was zero before. You'd have zero before.
Right.
So this is.
But how do you know I didn't have COVID? It's just.
This is not a COVID profile.
Okay.
I can tell you now categorically you did not have COVID.
But I have something good in my nose that came from the vaccine.
You have decent spike IgA in your nose.
You have to explain that because I am not a medical person.
So you first, the IgG and IgM, which are the circulating spike proteins, and those are the ones you really use once the virus gets in to neutralize it. And there's a way of testing the neutralizing antibodies. Unfortunately, your neutralizing was low. Doesn't mean you don't have T cells, which are the direct killer cells, and the ones that sort of direct the army of B cells. You might have a good T cell response. We don't know how to measure that yet quite effectively. All we do know is we can measure the IgG, the IgM, and the IgA, and your IgA looked pretty good to me in terms of protecting you from the outside world for the IgA that shows up in your nose against the virus. Now, if the virus gets in, you might get in some trouble, which is why it was a great idea.
Once it gets past my nose
exactly, which it really could. Not your nose hair. This is a biological event. If it gets to the IgA, it's because it's gotten well past your nose hairs.
Oh.
But it's just like a protective barrier. Think of it as a biological barrier. But if it gets
I wish Caleb could show it. I sent it to him, but I don't know if he has it. Just so you can see what it looks like.
Do you want to? All right. Do you want to show it, Caleb?
I want to censor out all of her personal info, so I'll have it ready for the next show.
Crop my information. Next show.
Next show. Okay, we'll show it up.
So
we'll show it on.
It's interesting. They had to take like
well, you
4
should show.
vials
Well,
of
you know what you
blood.
should do is show mine versus hers because mine looks totally
Yeah, so
different.
take a snapshot of yours and send it to
mine
Caleb.
looks impressive. Mine is like, whoa.
Yeah,
that
that's good.
immune.
Let's get yours and then just take a snapshot of it because you need a password to get it.
And we're going to be in here tomorrow with the writer of Dope Sick at 3 o'clock. Is that correct? Or 3:30?
Yes, that's correct.
There it is.
Beth Macy.
Macy, Dope Sick. 3 o'clock? 3 o'clock, everybody? Are we all in agreement?
3 p.m. Pacific.
3:30.
Yes.
3 o'clock. I see it up there. 3 o'clock Pacific.
And Caleb's doing Ask Dr. Drew this whole week for us.
And you know what? I have to apologize. I was so busy with the phone today, I didn't even go on Restream. So I that's never happened before. And
That's okay. They were behaving. Oh, except for Sophie. She wasn't. I had to mute her.
What happened to Sophie?
I don't know. She was just saying crazy stuff. You know.
Sophie was there yesterday. I think
she was. She was saying stuff like they use bleach and we don't need that in our stream.
Well, I'm on the Restream now, just as an homage to you guys. I'm back on it. So hello.
I know we love you guys.
And I've never done that. Not been hi to see Margaret.
We have some great people on Clubhouse. We appreciate the Clubhousers. I don't know if they're still there. Did you shut it off yet?
We haven't done. And we got a super chat. Thoughts on using L-methylfolate in addicted patients who have the MTHFR gene. Do I believe these patients can have dopamine tone raised by testing L-methylfolate? Callie, I think methylfolate is a good idea for most people, especially if they have that genetic mutation. It's certainly that we give tons of folate to drug addicts and alcoholics as a matter of routine because they're often deficient from the drugs and from the alcohol especially. But to try to adjust the chemistry sufficiently to have a clinical effect, no, that will not work. The overwhelming biology of addiction is so profound, we have no way to really pharmacologically alter it. And it's a wiring function and a epigenetic phenomenology as much as it is a biological effect at the synaptic level. This adjusting the synapse, adjusting the dopamine levels doesn't do a hell of a lot. It takes time for the genes that have been turned on and off by the drugs of addiction it takes time for those genetic mechanisms to dial back, as well as the rewiring to develop to turn on the frontal lobes, to decrease the drive systems, to decrease the ventral tegmental sensitivity into the shell of the nucleus accumbens. This is fantastically complex biology that is not affected by single agents. Not a bad idea, good thing, but not going to have a really significant clinical effect. Folate generally in an alcoholic reduces the incidence of Wernicke syndrome, and so we give it in bucket loads. All right, I'm going to end the Clubhouse. We thank you. So
if you want some more excitement, go to Fox LA tonight online, and you can see Drew there.
I'm going to end the Clubhouse room. We thank you all for being here. We'll be in here, I think, maybe tomorrow.
I think it's foxla.com/live or something like that.
I believe that's true. Fox LA. Hold on here. Let me see what I've got.
You're done with the Clubhouse, so I can
I'm
turn
done
off
with the Clubhouse, and I'm looking at the Restream now that I actually came on here with Chris. Caroline turned 8 this weekend. Thank you for your kindness and support. Happy birthday to Caroline.
That's a great age.
That is a great age. Caroline, I think she's correct. Caroline, happy birthday. Okay, we're gonna wrap up the entire thread here. I'm looking at
You're like Caleb. Hobo Kelly now.
Yes, it is like Hobo Kelly, who only you and I would understand that timely reference.
I'm sure there's other people here.
Unless you were watching TV in 1964, you would not know who Hobo Kelly was. And you have to have been watching in a couple of urban environments like Los Angeles to know Hobo Kelly. But thank you for those timely references, Susan. I appreciate that.
I love that.
So
we could dress you up like Hobo Kelly for Halloween.
I just want those
and you
big,
could just
those
go,
big
hi,
fake sunglasses.
Hi, Caroline. I see you.
Okay, now so I have to explain this. So what Hobo Kelly would do is she would put on these giant oversized sunglasses and go, "Oh, I can see it's
Susie.
It's Susan's birthday. Susan, look under your bed. There's a present from your mom. And oh, it's Caroline's birthday too. I bet her mom Chris has got some very fun plans for her. I see it. I see what's coming. There's a party coming." And it still delights.
We all thought it was.
Last time Susan heard this, she was 6, and it still delights her
4.
presently at this current age.
I was 4, honey.
4. Beg your pardon. Okay, I'm going to wrap this up. We thank you all for being here. We'll see you on tomorrow at 3 o'clock. Dope Sick is the book. And then Friday with Greg Ellis. We'll see you then. Ask Dr. Drew is produced by Caleb Nation and Susan Pinsky. As a reminder, the discussions here are not a substitute for medical care, diagnosis, or treatment. This show is intended for educational and informational purposes only. I am a licensed physician, but I am not a replacement for your personal doctor, and I am not practicing medicine here. Always remember that our understanding of medicine and science is constantly evolving. Though my opinion is based on the information that is available to me today, some of the contents of this show could be outdated in the future. Be sure to check with trusted resources in case any of the information has been updated since this was published. If you or someone you know is in immediate danger, don't call me, call 911. If you're feeling hopeless or suicidal, call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 800-273-8255. You can find more of my recommended organizations and helpful resources at drdrew.com/help.